When people say that artificial intelligence technology is all about intelligence, they're simply wrong. Why is that? Well, basically, it's very much about emotion. As you know, when educators think about opportunities and also the potential harms of artificial intelligence technology in schools, responses can cover an extreme range, anywhere from jubilation to an uncomfortable pit in the stomach. Now, you'll be comforted to know that my aim today is to produce neither of these reactions. I will begin my discussion at a general philosophical level, apply it to an analysis of AI, and then address ways that Catholic school educators can fruitfully engage students in this hyper-technological age. I will focus especially on the influence of AI on our struggle with the vice of instrumentality. Now, the term most commonly used by people is instrumental reason or instrumental rationality, but I use instrumentality to refer to a moral category, not merely a sociological condition or a type of logic. The vice of instrumentality involves reduction of the other, another being or thing, a person, or sometimes even God, to a tool, instrument, or means, or to a product that will be shaped or manipulated. This can be a disposition as much as a behavior, and it can be habitual and persistent. The vice, to be clear, is not simply the use of tools or design of technology, but reducing the world and the people in it into a mere toolbox, and reducing practical reason to calculation of efficient and effective use of means for our limited ends. We can trace the concern over instrumentality to the ancient Greeks, who generally distinguished attention to the logos from a focus on techne. The logos is the rationality of all being. It is the underlying law that keeps the universe in balance amid constant change. The ancient Greeks defined techne, on the other hand, as a knowledgeable, rational method of producing or crafting something. Techne is not the same as practical reason, which has the subject or the person as an end in themselves. Techne always points to something outside the person, the product. Also, unlike theoretical wisdom gained in contemplation, which orients us to understanding eternal truths and first principles, techne orients us to the more temporary and limited means of making things. While attention to the logos is about discovering the order of the world, techne is fundamentally about imposing a human order onto the world. And I apologize, I have handouts that have these terms on them, so please hand those around. Now, for most of the ancient Greeks, although they prized ingenuity and practical skill, to live well is to listen to the logos, to align one's mind with the objective structure of reality. Virtue is a person's immersion in and orientation to the truth. In the modern world, the vice that we struggle with is essentially the elevation and standardization of techne to the point that we can ignore the logos entirely. In doing so, we alter our experience of both practical and theoretical wisdom. Note that if the world seems to have no inherent or accessible logos, then the world becomes raw material for the application of techne. The New Testament, of course, gives a special resonance to the concept of logos. The Gospel of John starts with, "In the beginning was the logos." By identifying Christ as the logos, the Gospel of John indicates that the reason of the universe is not simply a mechanical, abstract, or purely formal law we can manipulate with our techne, but a relationship with a being, really the source of all being, who we must encounter in love, reverence, obedience, etc. And here is where the vice of instrumentality may connect with sin. When our instrumental dispositions and habits distract from or interfere with that personal relationship with God, they can develop into a variety of sins. These include pride, greed, vicious curiosity, impurity, intemperance, and acedia, which I discuss in my book in relation specifically to AI. It's important to recognize that the vice of instrumentality is a theme throughout the Bible, in the writings of the last several popes also. I provided a number of examples in the handout. We can also see it as a theme among saints like Augustine, Benedict of Nursia, Francis of Assisi, John Henry Newman, and Mother Teresa. In modern times, the Catholic philosopher Charles Taylor demonstrates that instrumental reason is one of three primary malaises or illnesses of the modern age. This is based on St. Thomas Aquinas' distinction between ratio, or the mental movement of reasoning, and intellectus, the satisfied rest of the mind in knowledge of reality. These are two moments of the rational mind. Intellectus is the end or purpose of ratio, but it also is receptive, contemplative, and intuitive. Ratio is necessary for limited material persons as a defect of the intellect, but it is restless. Taylor and the Catholic philosopher Joseph Pieper both describe the modern domination of ratio over intellectus as a kind of loss of the Sabbath. To be clear, this is not a concern about the use of too much reason. On the contrary, it is about an imbalance and a limitation among particular moments of rational thought. So let's bring this discussion of the vice of instrumentality into a discussion of today's technology. There are many prominent thinkers, including Pope Leo in his recent encyclical Magnifica Humanitas, and Pope Francis with his writing about the technocratic paradigm, who observe that modern technology inframes our reality. This is a term from Martin Heidegger. Basically, it means that technology and our relationship to it set a boundary around and provide the content and language for what we consider real or valuable. What I am proposing is that advanced technology powerfully encourages instrumentality because it doesn't just provide us with tools, it provides us with a totalizing way of seeing the world that overwhelmingly favors selection of means over contemplation of ends, techne over logos, and ratio over intellectus. Consider, for example, how AI treats knowledge. One feature of knowledge with AI is its orderability. Knowledge is categorized and tagged not for understanding, but so it can be summoned instantly to fulfill a prompt, regardless of its original intent or source. Knowledge for the AI user is very often a simple acquisition. It does not tend to appear as a graduated process, nor a personal state involving understanding, nor even a mental dialogue with the real personal source. Prompting of an AI chatbot is not intellectus or beholding. It is the transformation of the writer or thinker into a managerial technician who hacks or extracts output. On the other hand, intellectus no longer appears with AI to be an end that calls for effort, but a moment of immediate gratification to be acquired and applied. Even contemplation and intuition usually require a kind of friction, encountering the resistance of the real world to our thoughts and ideas, and putting real effort into examining what we think we know. With AI use, however, we very often don't want to study an object, which implies a humble intellectual submission to the object. We want to command a result. This prompt to the AI chatbot is the will exercising its power over the data. AI, finally, is also a kind of reality curator. If I can prompt an AI chatbot to explain a concept in 10 different ways, or even generate a truth that conforms to my specific bias, my awareness of a single objective reality becomes even more tenuous. For the ancient Greeks and for Christian philosophers, knowledge traditionally involved an uncovering of the essence or truth of a thing. When AI, however, treats knowledge as ordered, acquired, and automated, it shifts the focus from meaning to manipulability. Knowledge is no longer an insight to be dwelled upon or a wisdom to be lived. It is data to be processed. Information is only valuable to the system and often only perceived as valuable by the user if it contributes to the optimization of an output. For example, accuracy, speed, or engagement. And within the AI model's calculations, anything that cannot be mathematically or systematically processed or doesn't serve the efficiency of the model is discarded as noise. The user may have, therefore, a reduced experience of serendipity, surprise, context, and wisdom. The reduction of knowledge to quantifiable and orderable data can, ironically, generate an illusion of certainty. This can, in turn, increase the apparent authority of data-driven and computationally derived information, causing a relative decrease in reliance on personal, social, traditional, institutional, and religious sources of authority and credibility. Also with AI, we have an apparent eclipse of grace, of the given. The knowledge or information transmitted via AI chatbots hardly communicates its original development within person's intuition, contemplation, imagination, or even experience of revelation. We also no longer access and process the world itself. We ask a machine to process it for us, curate it, and feed it back to us in a palatable, optimized format. Okay, let's bring all of this into our discussion of Catholic education. In regard to concerns about AI and its encouragement of instrumentality, I think one of the primary goals of educators will be to protect students from encroachments on opportunities for playful, creative, reflective, and even slow learning. We want to carve out spaces that are useless or inefficient from an instrumental perspective, but essential from a human one. Educators might also help students to specifically build both their skills and characters so they thrive in the practice of intellectus. This means enhancing intuition, contemplation, and finding opportunities for students to experience intimate mental and spiritual connections to reality. In his recent encyclical, Pope Leo wrote, "The pervasiveness of digital media fosters a culture of immediacy and hyperstimulation, which gives rise to fatigue, boredom, and apathy concerning the effort required for seeking the truth. Education, by contrast, is a long journey requiring patience, and therefore needs time for development and for engagement with reality beyond appearances." As we know, critical thinking and creativity are both cognitive and dispositional, closely related to emotions and experience of wonder and awe, and real interactions with other persons. Even prayer, philosophy, and the appreciation of beauty can be integrated into age-appropriate traditional learning activities. Examples include a dedicated prayer before class discussion, questions and related projects regarding why we learn, study, or use certain technologies, thought exercises regarding tools and imaginative ways they can enhance human flourishing, art or poetry that helps to illustrate or even celebrate concepts learned in a science class or vocabulary learned in an English class, and collaboratively forming stories to assist with memorization. In the age of AI, it becomes even more important to help students develop both resilience and joy when applying effort to the mental movement of ratio that leads to the satisfied rest of intellectus. Transformative, profound connections with truth require the courage and passion to ask questions, face uncertainty and ambiguity, and take risks. Intentionally choosing slow methods of synthesis, handwriting, deep reading, and silent reflection is not an act of stubborn resistance to technology, but an act of preserving the intellectual vision that AI bypasses. Process-based evaluation, feedback, and grading can be an excellent way to teach students how to work through writing and other projects without focusing only on efficient production of the final product. This includes work on rough drafts, peer reviews, and out loud presentations. Another possible approach is the use of jigsaw methods that break up projects into distinct parts and ask individual students or small groups to teach and defend their work to the others and then work together to synthesize their efforts. Also, educators might consider scenario-based problem solving that is oriented around localized real-world scenarios or problems, and which draw on both physical resources or texts and collaboration or negotiation between students. Another way to counter the pressures of instrumentality is to teach students to look for and recognize epiphanies that are unintentional insights that break through and challenge what they thought they knew before. This is especially powerful in education because it teaches students to move from a reliance on certainty, which is a form of control, to faith and trust, which is a form of receptivity. One way to do this is to have students engage in learning projects that have few rules or guidelines and which are rewarded for intense engagement rather than correctness of the output. The key here is to follow up by guiding students in discussing, recognizing, and celebrating their new and creative ideas. Now, the billion-dollar question is whether it's possible to integrate AI into any of these teaching activities. There are and will be many creative strategies for using and designing AI tools for education. So far, however, it seems to be a rare thing when AI is an exceptionally appropriate tool proven through careful research and a better tool than alternatives. It's important to be aware of sources for educators that raise significant questions about the commercial marketing of and available research about the new AI-governed educational applications. I included a couple of references in the handouts. Creative strategies with AI can backfire. For example, AI applications can be developed to focus on asking probing questions rather than only providing answers. But keep in mind that even here, reliance on AI can be a problem because students need to learn to form their own questions, especially good ones that draw on insight and prior thought. Also, teachers might develop skills to use back and forth conversations with AI chatbots to brainstorm and explore new ideas while demonstrating critical awareness of the biases and flaws in the chatbot's reasoning and presentation of information. But we need to be realistic. If adult professionals are confused and easily persuaded, as studies repeatedly show, how much critical capacity can we really expect from our young students when using AI-based applications? Finally, the overwhelming tendency of AI, based on its very nature and architecture, to encourage the vice of instrumentality needs to be taken seriously. Although it does not control us, the nature of AI unfortunately encourages a very instrumental, limited, power-oriented, and acquisition-oriented approach to knowledge as well as behavior. In contrast, the ability of each person to align their efforts and goals with the personal divine logos, to truly listen, study, reflect, pray, and lovingly encounter reality is the very essence of living a virtuous life, a fulfilling life. As Pope Leo wrote in his encyclical, schools are not called to follow the pace of the digital world. So rather than merely reflecting or enhancing the world's hyper-technological tendencies, each school can be a thriving oasis where students not only memorize and reason, but also rest, reflect, and cultivate along with their peers and teachers. To be clear, an oasis in the desert is not defined by borders or walls, does not exclude even the winds and the sand. An oasis nourishes and protects life with the water that comes from deep within. It transforms the living plants and animals that gather there. The challenge of education in the age of AI, then, is to create thriving oases in the classrooms and within individuals to reach the living depths within every student so their human dignity grows and radiates outward within a culture that is starving for an authentically human way of life. Thank you.
Hi, guys. My name is Christina Mehaffey. I'm the principal of Faustina Academy. I've been the principal for almost 25 years. We started in 2003, and we have with 23 students, and today we have 220 K through 12. Before I get started, I just wanted to ask, how many of you guys are principals yourselves or administrators or board members? Okay, great. Okay. One of the things I have found being the hardest part of being a principal is getting everyone in the community on the same page. Oh, you want me to hold the mic? Sorry. Okay. It's getting everyone on the same page. Because everyone comes to our schools with different backgrounds, experiences, and different expectations. When everyone is on the same page as the mission of the school, it becomes much easier and the goals are more achievable. And our mission, as probably as the rest of you guys, is leading souls to heaven in the formation of our faith and character. That is our mission, is to lead souls to heaven, and that is our sole mission. And everything that we do centers on that mission. So it became very clear to us several years ago when we began seeing the effects of technology, smartphones, and social media on our students. And it was disrupting our mission. What we discovered was that this was not just a technology problem. It was an alignment problem. Today, I'd like to share what Faustina Academy did to create that alignment between parents, students, and the school. And how I did it was to get the parents locked in. And that's what I'm kind of do with you. I'm going to try to get you locked in the same way I did with our parents at the school. So kind of bear with me on this. What we thought we already had, no phones, no devices, no iPads, no laptops, no technology was used for instruction. If the students needed to research or type a paper or do a project, they did it at home and brought it back to school. What we discovered when smartphones were introduced with ways to connect to the world, we began noticing something. Something was off. Technology wasn't on our campus, but its influence was. We began seeing changes in our students, changes in the way they related to one another, in their attitudes, in their attention in class, in the way they treated adults. The influence had already done its work before the students ever walked through the doors each morning. And what we had in place was sound, but this experience forced us to ask a different question. What other messages are our students receiving when they leave us each day? Because every child is being formed by something. The question is, who is doing the forming? Students were bringing into school everything they had been consuming outside of school. The videos they watched, the influencers they followed, the music they listened to, the trends they were exposed to. Then came the jokes, the slang, their attitudes, the locker room talk, the entitlement. And we observed increased anxiety, difficulty staying on task, paying attention in class, emotional comparisons, up and down depression, eating disorders, and the biggest one was pornography. That's when we realized something very important. A no-phone policy was not enough. The real issue was the influence, because influence does not stop at the school doors. Influence follows the children home, into their bedrooms, late into the night. What good is it if we spend 7 hours a day teaching the good, the true, and the beautiful, if our students then spend 4, 5, or 6 hours being formed by messages that teach the opposite? And if we truly believe that Catholic education exists to form saints, then we should not ignore one of the most powerful influences shaping our students outside of school. An influence that is actually changing our children's brains, changing who they are meant to be. So the question is, what can a school actually do? What is within our control? Do we just ignore it? Is it not our problem? No, we think it is our problem. And not only that, it is our duty as Catholic leaders to find a solution for the sake of preserving our mission. We need to change our culture to get our kids back to focusing on what really matters in the life: eternity. After all, that is the only reason why we exist in the first place. So how can we do that? Our solution: partner with the parents. Not more discipline measures, not more rules, not simply a longer handbook policy. 100% partnership. We needed to get the parents locked in. We could keep phones off campus. We could control what happened during the school day. We could even control who was in each class. But we could not control what happened to them after 3:30. That meant parents had to be part of the solution, 100%. Not a few, not a majority, but every single one. And not just informed, but aligned. There is a difference. Informed parents know the policy. Aligned parents understand the mission. Informed parents hear the rule. Aligned parents believe in the purpose behind the rule. And that is what we needed. We needed all of us moving in the same direction. When that happens, the child receives one clear message: at school, at home, in the classroom. That consistency is what begins to form culture. If parents were going to be our partners, then we first had to help them understand exactly what we were seeing. We had to educate the parents. The first thing we did is I held mandatory meetings for every age group. Kindergarten through second, third through sixth, and 7th through 12th, and these meetings were spread out in 2 weeks. Every parent had to attend these meetings. And once the parents were in the room, we began by helping them understand how these platforms how they work. At these parent meetings, I brought in an IT expert to help explain that these apps are businesses, and their business model depends on one thing: attention. The more attention they grab, the more money they make. The longer the users stay online, the more money they generate. Their success depends on keeping people engaged for as long as possible. Our IT expert walked parents through the design of these platforms. Every notification, every vibration, every like, every streak, every endless scroll was not an accident. These features are intentionally designed to keep users coming back. They spend billions of dollars researching human behavior. They hire psychologists, behavioral scientists, data analysts, engineers, all with the goal of answering one question: how do we get them to become lifelong members? Through addiction. And who can they target to get the most money? Children. The most vulnerable, with underdeveloped self-control and self-discipline. This was one of the most eye-opening moments for many parents. But understanding the business model wasn't enough. Parents needed to see what their children were actually seeing. Know the exposures. We showed them exactly what their children were seeing live: Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. We simply started scrolling and showed them how algorithms worked, how dopamine works. They saw sexualized content, influence promoting lifestyles completely contrary to the values they were trying to teach at home, messages about popularity, about appearances, about sex. And then we showed them something even more disturbing: how quickly a child can be exposed to pornography with just one click. And I don't know about you, but being in my role over the years, I've heard heartbreaking, gut-wrenching stories of kids that have been sucked into pornography, all from being accidentally exposed. Many parents were stunned because they genuinely had no idea. These platforms are shaping how children see themselves, see relationships, see happiness, feel loved, and none of it links to their Creator and His purpose for them. I asked the parents, is this what you want forming your children after school, late at night, in their bedrooms, during the most vulnerable years of their development? Do you want them to have an addiction that they can't control, which will lead into lifelong other addictions? So let's look at our reality. Before we can ask our children to change their habits, we have to be willing to examine our own. One of the questions I asked parents was, how many of you have ever been told by your child, "Mom, can you just listen to me for a minute?" You never listen, you're always on your phone. It's true, but we have good reasons, right? We're answering a text, checking email, responding to work messages, finishing up one last thing. But the reality is that many of us adults struggle to put our phones down too. And if grown adults with fully developed brains struggle with self-control and screen habits, how much harder it is for a child. It was about recognizing that we are all living in a culture designed to grab our attention, a culture where distraction has become normal, and a tool the devil uses to take us away from our purpose. So the question was, what do we do now? Parents needed practical tools. They needed a plan. They needed support, and they needed reinforcement. One of the most important messages we communicated was this: we're all in this together. If an entire school is making similar decisions, then children don't feel isolated. They don't feel like they are the only child without a phone. They don't feel like they are missing out on what everyone else is doing. In fact, one of the greatest pressures parents face today is not technology itself, it's the fear that their child will be left out. Coined FOMO, the fear of missing out. Because parents would often hear, but everyone else is doing it. Everyone else has one. All my friends are on it. And that's exactly why community matters. Have you ever heard the expression, it takes a village? So parents were compelled to delay phones until at least 8th grade, monitor online activity, know what apps their children were using, to have access to passwords, and to know who their children were communicating with. And most importantly, we encouraged regular conversations. Now, this is the hard part. I had to actually talk to parents and get them to understand that they had to be the source of all information. How many parents, and I, in my school, asking parents after these mandatory meetings, how many of them talked to their children about the stages of development their children were going through? Especially the middle school students who start learning about the opposite sex and having that attraction to them. Their attraction zones are turned on. Do they understand the changes in their body? Do they understand what they're going through? Why do they have these funny feelings in places they didn't know that, was going to happen? Do parents talk about that to their children? The answer was no across the board. They didn't. The children were discovering things that they didn't know anything about. Why? Because the curiosity in their brain was ignited, and they're curious about these things. And so if they're curious, they're going to start asking questions. And if parents don't talk to them about this stuff, they don't go to their parents. So where are they learning the information? They're learning it from the internet, or there are other friends who have also learned it from the internet. If parents aren't having these conversations, someone else will, and they will learn it. And it's not God's design, it's not God's intention, it's not true intimacy, it's not true happiness. They're going to be learning it from the ground up, the false love, false intimacy. They're not going to learn how to develop relationships. They're not going to understand God's design or purpose. So the next step after that is getting the parents to commitment. Then came the policy. Then came the contract. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. Isn't that crossing a line? Shouldn't what happens at home be left entirely to the parents? These are fair questions. So I asked the parents, how many of you would go to the ends of the earth for your child if they were sick, if they had cancer? How many of you would change jobs, move cities, or completely rearrange your life to protect your children from something that could harm them? So what about what is at their fingertips every day? What about something that enters through a screen? What about pornography? What about the proven research by pediatricians, psychiatrists, the Surgeon General, and countless others on the negative impact screens have on children, not to mention pornography addiction as the real global pandemic? Why would we do everything in our power to protect a child's life, but not put the same effort into protecting their mind, their heart, and their soul? Which is what we're trying to form during the school day at school. So we made our expectations clear. We did ban social media from all enrolled students all year long. Every student that comes to our school cannot be on social media until they graduate or leave. During the summers, during breaks, they cannot have social media. We also don't have the cell phone policy. We don't have them have their cell phones. And if they do have their cell phones for communication or carpool issues, they turn it into the office the minute they walk onto campus, and they cannot pick it up until dismissal, and they are off campus. They can't even use it if they pick up their phones at dismissal until they leave campus. But one of the things that I did was it began at the interview process with the parents. We had family interviews, mandatory attendance at parent orientations, the written policy, signed compliance. Every single parent and student had to sign that they agreed this is to be a part of Faustina Academy. They had to sign this commitment. And re-enrollment contracts every year they'd have to sign a recommitment. So it didn't, if they were enrolled in our school, it didn't just stay that way. They're in forever. Nope. Every year they had to recommit to the policy and our other standards of expectations for the school. Everyone had to be on the same page for it to work. Everybody. Because again, if you have a group that some do it, some don't, it's a mixed message with the students within the class. And remarkably, everyone embraced it. Everybody signed on. Nobody left. And it doesn't stop at the contracts. Culture requires ongoing formation. One conversation is not enough. So every year we return to this conversation and keep it going all year long. At the beginning of the year, I hold mandatory parent orientations where we renew the commitment together. We also hold a student orientation where we speak directly to the students about their commitment to the school, to their classmates, to their families, and to themselves. We also have a no-fit policy. If you do not abide or you're dragging your feet as a student, okay, well, my parents are making me do this, so I really don't want to be here, then they're no longer a fit to be at the school. And that is explained very clearly to them as well. We also created parent-led grade socials. A parent from each grade would host a gathering for the other parents in that same grade. To keep the purposes, their children are growing up together every year, and the purpose is friendship, conversation, trusting one another, and going along each grade, every age of development with the same grade of parents. They are also provided a group of topics to discuss for that age group with each other. Like what stages are there, like friendships, group texts, what movies do they like to watch? I mean, things that keep the conversations appropriate for that age group, but also things that parents can help one another with. Maybe some parents are doing things differently that are promoting a virtue that other parents would love to know about and learn from each other. So it's a great way to continue a parental friendship and partnership along with the parents in their grades. This matters because these children are growing up together, their friendships influence one another, their homes influence one another, their choices influence one another. And what happened as a result was a new culture was created and cultivated. And we started building real community. We saw, after we put this policy in place, a change in our culture. The kids were authentic with one another. They started developing real friendships. You had we didn't ever have phones in our school, but the conversations were not about pop culture. We had better attitudes, attention in the class, actually a value of what we were actually doing in the school. Our education, they actually valued it, and they had a gratitude that we hadn't seen in years. The students actually were grateful. We created opportunities for students and families to gather together outside the classroom. Picnics, barbecues, feast day celebrations, sporting events, family activities. And then we had the student council lead student activities to get themselves together. They would go on service trips and then come back and do something fun and social. But we made sure that was going on monthly or every other month so that the kids just stayed together and had fun things to look forward to within their own school. And it was in this community that led us to what I believe is the most important lesson that we learned, which was alignment. After 25 years as principal, I've come to believe that the most important, everything rises and falls on alignment. The reality is that no school can accomplish its mission if everyone is pulling in different directions. What happens when a school teaches one thing and the home teaches another? Children become confused. And confusion is the enemy of formation. We realized that if we truly wanted to form saints, we all had to be moving in the same direction. And alignment is the key to living out the mission of the school. So the work never ends. The goal is continual formation for parents and children alike. So we have, and I have these little packets of things that I made for every one of you guys. This is an outline of what this talk was about. If you wanted to give a parent orientation and you wanted to touch on this topic, I gave you a sample parent orientation of talking points that kind of compel the parents to get on board with this and to realize that social media and technology and pornography are changing our kids. And I truly believe now, after experiencing what we've experienced and actually being behind the desk and listening to all the stories across the nation of people coming to move across country for our school, and listening to what's going on out there and what their children have been exposed to and all the things that they are fighting against and trying to preserve, that innocence, that purity, that self-control, that self-discipline, that all the virtues that we are trying to cultivate, I realized that there is no point in doing what we do as educators in the classroom when the kids are disconnected from what we're trying to teach them. And we can't even inform them if they are allowed to be online after school hours. I mean, there is no point. That is, they are if we let the parents make that choice, then that's why the school needs to say, we do not do this here. And I'm telling you how many parents are relieved when they come and say, I want to go to a school that does not allow our kids to go on it because we can't fight this battle alone. The children are up against what their friends are doing, what's popular. Oh, everyone's online, everyone's going to the movies, but I don't have a phone or I don't have the internet, so or this group, Instagram or whatever, and they don't know about any of the events that the other kids are planning because they're not on the line. If everybody's on the same page, you're not going to have that peer pressure. You're not going to have that pressure as parents. So that is why we cultivate other events that they can be invited to and join in, and everyone feels part of it. And what it feels like is a big family. That's what everyone feels like at the school. One of the things that I pulled together and actually bought several samples for the parents was The Good Pictures, Bad Pictures from, I don't know if have anyone ever heard this book, The Good Pictures, Bad Pictures? Okay. I told the parents if they would just read this, 3 or 4 year olds, starting from 4 years old on, it is an excellent explanation of how the brain works, but on a child's language level. There's the thinking brain, the feeling brain, and then as they get older, there's the attraction zones that are turned on. And it helps you understand what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and helps kids identify what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. Because right now in today's world with billboards and advertisements, they're desensitized to what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. So we as parents need to teach them what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and how to name it, how to call it, and what to do when you find something that's inappropriate, right? The kids have to know this. And then this is a great one for administrators or teachers or to learn when you have students that struggle with things. This is a great thing to know how to talk to the students, give it to the parents. The other one gives, so this is like the little kid one, this is the older kid one version. And it's not cheesy, it's not like Two Below Elementary, because it's very, very good how they explain that in these books. I offered it to the parents. The other thing I did was this book, I don't know, since parents do not, it's an awkward conversation to talk to their kids about the birds and the bees, which I've noticed so many people just don't do that anymore. They just say, I mean, I even asked a couple of parents, well, why aren't you covering this topic at home? They're going to be learning it, and it's not going to be the right, it's not going to be God's intention or creation. And they said, well, we learned it on our own. Our parents didn't tell us. And I'm like, oh, but we're in a different world now. You don't want what the internet's teaching them. So this one is called Growing Up in God's Image. And this one's not on there, but I'm just going to show you this one. This is amazing. It is actually a script, and before they tell the child about the facts of life, it is literally a beautiful description of God's design before that, and it explains it in a beautiful way. And so many parents have been so grateful for this script, so that they can use it at home to teach their children along the way with understanding and talking to them about the development of their bodies, the different stages of development, and when that attraction zone is turned on, what they need to expect, how God's design is made, and so forth. So when I tell the parents, I'm like, keep that conversation going. You've got to keep it, because in today's world, the changes in their bodies are starting younger and younger. It's not so much anymore 7th and 8th, it's going into 6th grade. And I'm like, and kids are already learning these, do I have to go? We're almost done. I'm almost done. That's it. We're almost done. Anyway, these are the resources. Okay, and then, the last thing is there is a program that it's in this package I can give you, is called Screen Guardians, and it is a program that was developed by a Catholic mom. Her name is Katie Longhauser in Kansas City, and she developed a program from K through 12th, and it teaches at a very young age how your brain works, starting with kindergarten on up, and it is a beautiful program. it's only like meant for teachers to use once a week, but it helps the kids and parents learn together how their brains work, because I don't remember learning about our brain when we were in school, and it's designed to help you understand how dopamine works and the dopamine hits and the dopamine dumps and how to manage and balance that out. It's a great program. My teachers, we started it in January, and it has just been made a world of difference with what we're doing at the school and our parents understanding, and it's still continuing with the education of the parents and students. And man's last end, this is last it. The encyclical of Christian education says, it is therefore as important to make no mistake in education as it is to make no mistake in the pursuit of man's last end. In fact, since education consists essentially in preparing man for what he must be and for what he must be do here below, it is clear that there can be no true education which is not wholly directed towards man's last end. So it should all be incorporated in if that's the purpose of the school. Thank you.
My name is Malia Busekrus, and I'm the principal at St. Rita Catholic School in Alexandria, Virginia. And this is Christina Hanley. She's our 7th grade teacher, our middle school lead, and she really should have the little speaker badge too. She has been on this committee with me for the last couple years, and she and I worked on and prepared for this speech together, so she's also a presenter today. So our hope is that through this presentation of Real Presence Collective that we could inspire you to do something similar at your school or to join one of the programs that already exist throughout the country.
So, hi, my name is Christine Hanley. I have been a middle school teacher for just over 10 years now, and this is my 4th year at St. Rita. The effects of technology, there you go, cannot be understated. As educators, we all see it, and it's just been getting worse over the years, academically, socially, behaviorally. And even at St. Rita School, we're a very low-tech school, which is a blessing, but even in our school, to your earlier point, the effects of technology are leaking in, because what's happening when they leave our school, we have no control over that. And, you know, not even just in the middle school, but also into the lower grades, what they're being exposed to at home, and then just the things that are coming through the middle school leaking down into those lower grades. So it was clear we needed to do something to help our students and to help our families. So we gathered together. We formed a group, we discussed it, and we got some teacher volunteers. We wanted to make sure that these were going to be teachers who were genuinely invested and motivated in this, because we knew it was going to be a lot of work outside of our contracted hours, most likely. And we wanted to make sure that it was a mix of our lower and our upper grades, because I think the inclination is to assume that it's mostly older kids that are being affected, but like we've seen, the little kids are also really starting to feel these things. And then, of course, we brought in our priest. On the one hand, it makes it official, but on the other hand, more importantly, we wanted to make sure that this was a Christ-centered, saving group. We're really focusing on family formation and formation of our children, and in pursuit of the good, the true, and the beautiful, following our Catholic and classical mission. Where to begin? At the beginning, with the parents. There's going to be something here, don't worry. Our parents are the primary educators of our students, and we needed to partner with them. So I went and I did a bunch of research, and I created a survey, and I sent it out, and 80 of our families were able to answer. Of those families, 18 said that, yes, their children have smartphones. And of those number, 2/3 were in middle school, the rest in the lower grades, with the youngest being in preschool. Which, why does a preschooler need a smartphone? I don't know. And with that, I also asked, how many of you allow your children to bring those phones into their rooms unsupervised? And 25% of those families said that they do. And that's only phones. That's not even mentioning things like video games or computers or iPads or what have you. Some of the questions that I asked were, did you know that cell phone usage can be addictive? Did you know that there's a correlation between screen time and brain development? What do you think is the average age for exposure to sexual content on the internet? Most of our families did guess 12 years old. And that was what was most shocking, was that they had this awareness, but our students were still getting smartphones. So clearly there's some type of a disconnect happening here. So we needed to try and evaluate where is that disconnect and how can we help our parents and our families in addressing this. By the way, a 2022 survey of teens did show that 15% are exposed to sexual content on the internet before 11, 54% by 13, and a large percentage of that, it's accidental. So it's not even on purpose.
So with 90% of our families saying, yes, we would love some way to partner with you during this time to help us decrease the pressure on parents to get their kids phones, because even though they knew all this, they were getting the phones. And so what we realized is that there's that pressure there. And at the same time, I was heading into my final semester of grad school and had to pick a research project. So I decided to research the impact of device use on young children. And what I found with the gap in the literature was really parents' understanding. There wasn't a lot out there on formation of parents for them to know what technology is actually doing to their children. And so we did several things in response to that. We started by providing the anxious generation to all of our parents, as well as the tech exit for those parents who had already bought their kids a phone or who had already read the anxious generation. Then we invited Peter Ryan. He's an advocate for sharing the impact that device use is having on this generation, and he shares very personally on the significant impact it has had on his own family, and that's what has made him like a nationwide speaker now. So we thought, how do we get as many people as possible to hear about this? And so we invited him to attend our back to school night, which is when 90% of our parents will show up for something. Additionally, a few weeks later, we had a women's conference, and we invited Claire Morell, who was the author of The Tech Exit. And the reason we wanted her to come and speak as well was to give hope that just because you already bought your kid the phone, or just because you personally are already addicted, there is hope and there is a way to get out of this. And so in addition, we updated our cell phone policy. We similarly had a policy where you could just turn your phone in the morning and we'd give it back to you in the afternoon, and the parents would fill out a quick form. So we made it more difficult, where you had to actually reach out to me and we had to have a conversation as to why your child needs to bring a cell phone to school and explain to me. So then with an agreement, we'd come to this agreement. We had 6 parents that signed up saying, yes, my child, had a conversation with me. So prior to that, we had many phones coming to school. But now that you had to have a conversation, that prevented some of them. So we had 6 at the beginning of this past school year. But it became a big nuisance to the kids because only the nurse had the phone, and then you had to find the nurse at the end of the school day. And kids really got to the point of, it's not even worth bringing our phone to school. So now I have one child who occasionally brings it to school, but other than that, I checked with the nurse just yesterday to make sure I was giving the facts right. She said nobody's bringing it anymore. It's just too much of a hassle. So our core team continued to meet, and we kept wrestling with, so what do? We have this information, we know our kids are struggling, but we don't know what to do. If our threshold was to replace smartphones, what would we replace it with? We needed to create opportunities for families to connect and encourage the organic development of friendships and activities. So we spent a lot of time looking into the Wait Till 8th program. And then we thought, well, maybe we should be called Wait Till 9th. And then we kept thinking, well, what are we waiting for? To get a phone? We didn't want to encourage that either. So then we looked into the St. Carlo Parent Network. We met with the people who created the Postman Pledge, looked a lot into the Let Grow program, which comes out of the Anxious Generation. So we did a lot of thinking over that year, and what we came to was we really needed something for St. Rita. We needed something that matched our culture and that was created by the people that are at the school, But how would we come up with the philosophy, the name, who's going to run this? And that's when we realized we need parents. So up to this point, so at that point, I sent out a survey saying, here's where we are in this whole process, and we need parents, and we need them to, so the survey said who would like to join us on this committee. And so we had people that did, and we started to meet with them each month. We created the Real Presence Collective website page that explained what it was. And then we finally, we launched and came up with the name and launched it this past June, or last June 2025. And it is called the Real Presence Collective, an incarnational approach to friendship, family, and the good life. So parents have taken on the lead roles of managing the website, organizing events outside of school, and then continuing to meet with us quarterly. And then in response, we knew we needed to do something as well, and we needed to agree to show our commitment to the parents. And so we agreed to host 2 events each year outside of school hours that would be fully funded by us, and it would benefit both the children and the parents, to give the parents a 3 or 4 hour break. So I will let you continue with the philosophy. But one thing I want to make sure is clear too is what they were committing to, and what we were asking people to commit to, is not getting your child a personal device that could be connected to the internet in their years while they were at St. Rita. Or be on social media, right? So, thank you.
Okay. So this is an excerpt from our philosophy. It's much longer than this. We wanted to emphasize that we are partnering with families. We're creating a community-driven collective action approach where we're protecting healthy childhood culture. And I know it's kind of a wall of text, but I am going to just read it very quickly because it kind of summarizes everything, I think. So, just as Christ entered the world not virtually, but in the flesh, to walk with us, speak with us, and form us in love, so too does our program affirm the deep and irreplaceable value of real, face-to-face human connection. In a time when digital devices increasingly mediate and fragment relationships, we call families to a renewed commitment to being fully present, both in their homes and communities, to engaging in the slow, intentional, and personal nature of meaningful relationships and friendships rooted in the here and now. This incarnational approach is not simply a rejection of smartphones and other internet-capable devices, but more than that, it is a joyful affirmation of what it means to live the good life, together, whole, grounded, and truly human. St. Rita School fully embraces this program as a vital extension of our mission to form virtuous, healthy, and happy individuals. Together with our families, we resolve to face the cultural challenges our children face today with courage, offering them a pathway to thrive as resilient, joyful, and faithful disciples of Christ, fully present. And we believe in it wholeheartedly. Okay, so with that, Mrs. Busekrus mentioned that we committed to hosting 2 main events. This was part of this idea of offering a third space. For so many families, one of the reasons that they buy their children smartphones is because in their minds, that is how they connect with their friends. That is the medium through which their friendships are being facilitated, if you want to say that. So we realized that if they don't have smartphones, how are they going to be given these opportunities? They need a third space. And so we committed to becoming that kind of central hub for them where families can connect, form, and grow together. So some of the things that our RPC program has done this year, they've done a lot of volunteering, actually. They've gone on hikes, they've done whitewater rafting, they've gone to sports games, they've done book clubs, and then just good old-fashioned play dates. And these have all been parent-run. On the school side of things, I hope that video will pop in. Let's see. We agreed to do 2 big events outside of school hours, and they are school funded, and it's just a show of our investment and commitment to this program. So this year we had the Fall Festival and the Spring Spectacular, and it was spectacular for sure. And it was definitely driven by this kind of nostalgia for the way that outside play used to be. We had winners, we had losers, we had people crying, and that's okay. And we had people who got injured, and rub some dirt in it, you're gonna be okay. And for next year, we're definitely looking for more opportunities too. Oh, yes, perfect. Okay, so this video shows a clip from the beginning of the Fall Festival and one of the activities we did, and then just 2 really cute little clips from our Spring Spectacular. And hopefully the sound is connected. We'll find out. No. I try. Oh, well, maybe we can circle back to that rather than spend time. We'll try again. It's super cute. I edited it. Okay. We'll try at the end. Anyways. Short of that.
So now here we are, onwards and upwards, and trying to figure out what do we know now, what's going to happen now. So the families that took the pledge last June were 18 families. We have 135 families total. So we started off with only 18, but we were super excited. Then in September, we had 58 families, December 68. And then just this past week, I confirmed we now have 73 families, which is 112 of our 206 K-8 students. We don't open it to our preschoolers because we can't handle the 60 additional kids that would come to our events. But we're hoping that when they come to kindergarten, they'll join as well. We continue with our parent board and regular school meetings. We do have that dedicated page on our website. And then we also are working on a teacher philosophy regarding AI, so following up on the AI presentation, to also include the education of parents and the students. And so after focusing so much on parent education the past 2 years, this year, like you guys did, we're going to move into student education. And one of the things we do is we meet with our middle schoolers who are part of this. Very few middle schoolers, there's probably 15 total, who are part of Real Presence Collective because the rest are already on technology. But that group, we try to really empower and meet with them and find out what can we do to make this worth it for you too. And so along with that, we're also going to be getting a curriculum called the Screen Strong. And then we're also buying the book, The Amazing Generation, and it's just a cute little short novel about the brain that we'll use for the middle schools this coming year. But really and I'll look into the one you just talked about, really we're trying to help the kids see the why. Why are we pushing no screens? What is this doing to your brain? And helping them to fully accept it and understand it as well, instead of just the parents. And then we're hoping to have a retreat this year and get that spiritual aspect of staying away from screens as well. And then we are considering the social media ban as part of our admissions. And then also the kids that did graduate from St. Rita, now they're in high school, finding out who else has continued this to stay off of technology or having their own internet device, and keeping in touch with them and then inviting them back to speak to our middle school. And then this is just a bunch, we're going to share this slide presentation with you, and it just is filled with everything that we just spoke about. So you can have access to everything, including our cell phone policy and some other articles. And that's it.